Okay, that's the Sunday Papers, and we'll go straight now to our program guest, the Shadow Treasurer Joe Hockey, who joins us from our Sydney studios. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning, Barry.
Well, it seems you got your way on the mining tax. It's not going to hurt the mining companies at all, at least not up until now.
Well, it does hurt them because it costs millions of dollars in accounting fees. In fact, Atlas Iron, a mid-tier iron ore company, admitted this week that they're spending up to $2 million on compliance procedures and costs for a tax that they don't have to pay. And it has a big impact on our sovereign risk, Barry. Of course, our international reputation has been affected by the introduction of a tax on mining. There's no doubt about that.
But the first instalment was zero. Now, you've been saying it was going to have a devastating impact on them. It's not going to have a devastating impact at that rate.
Well, hang on. I mean, you're taking a point of time. This has had 5 different versions, this mining tax. The original version under Kevin Rudd was going to raise $11 billion in just 2 years and was fully estimated to raise $23 billion. Of course that would have an impact on the mining industry. And that's when we said it would have a devastating impact. Now, 4 versions later and 7 different sets of numbers later, it's raising 0. But you know what's interesting, Barry? The contingent liability associated with this. If the mining companies pay 0 this year in mining tax, they'll have an accrued liability from the Commonwealth for the refund of royalties for this year that will carry over to next year. So the bottom line is this tax may raise no money for many years to come.
You don't think it'll raise any money over the next 12 months?
Well, I mean, that's up to the mining companies. To be honest, not even the Liberal Party believed that there wouldn't be a dollar paid. I mean, not even we believe that, Barry. Seriously, anywhere in the world, I've never heard of a tax that raises no money. I mean, but the incompetence of the Labor Party is at a whole new level. But
you're saying then that the big miners won't be any more profitable over the next 3 quarters than they were in the last quarter?
Well, it depends. It depends on how it's structured within the mining companies, and of course it depends on the individual mines and the liabilities associated with individual mines. But quite frankly, if they're not going to pay money in the first quarter, and Wayne Swan has refused to confirm or deny it, which is extraordinary because of his trickery, but if they don't pay anything in the first quarter, it's highly likely they won't be paying anything in the remaining 3 quarters.
But in the end, doesn't this sort of underline the fairness of it, that they only pay the extra taxes if they make bigger profits? That's the point of it. It's a profits-based tax.
Well, then why is the government spending billions of dollars against a profits-based tax that is so volatile?
No, but that's a different point. I mean, you criticise the tax itself.
It isn't a different point. We criticise the package, Barry, and we criticise the tax, but we criticise the package. And the government has committed billions of dollars in expenditure against a tax that is so volatile. And I don't know how many times over the last 3 years I've been saying that if the mining boom comes to an end and if the money isn't there, you've got this structural hole in the budget because the government is spending and spending mining tax that may not be there.
Yeah,
I've been proven right.
And then my point is, if the money is there, then what's wrong with a profits-based tax?
Well, you already have a company tax that the miners pay, which is a profits-based tax. And on top of that, they're paying royalties and increased royalties to the states. Now, so it's not as if they're not paying a profits-based tax. This is a third tax that is going to apply. And now we know it's not raising a ZAC.
On the part out of the mini budget, the so-called mini budget, that when they brought forward the company taxes now to monthly, the coalition government changed the rules so that business paid their taxes quarterly rather than annually. Did that cost the companies any money at the time?
Well, there was a trade-off, and the overall trade-off out of our entire tax package was the abolition of financial institutions duty, the abolition of wholesale sales tax, the introduction of a GST, the abolition of 2 or 3 other taxes like bed taxes and so on. And out of the entire package, there was a structure, there was a strategy. You know what, Barry? This government has no fiscal strategy. It has no taxation strategy. It is simply making it up as it goes along. Full stop. So there was nothing else to add.
There was a trade-off, what? Because asking them to pay quarterly rather than annually costs them money. It costs them money, why? Because that's money they can't invest?
It brings money forward. It affects the capital and and obviously some of the liquidity of various companies. But the bottom line here is Wayne Swan is collecting $8.3 billion extra in his forward estimates. Now, if Wayne Swan's collecting $8.3 billion extra, someone else is $8.3 billion worse off. It's not hard to work out, and obviously it affects the liquidity and capital structures of a number of companies. And it's the only difference between Wayne Swan promising a surplus in an election year and actually delivering a deficit.
So you will then oppose this measure when it comes before the Parliament?
Well, we're still in discussions with the business community about it. But frankly, the business community has given up on the government. I mean, to walk away from the business tax working group is an extraordinary sign that the business community has given up on the government. And why wouldn't they? They had the Ken Henry review on taxation, and that went virtually nowhere. Then they had a tax summit, and then you had your business tax working group. All of these things are coming to a cul-de-sac, and the government clearly has no taxation policy other than to hit Australians harder.
But you don't know whether you'll oppose it or not. You're reserving the right to criticise it and support it.
Well, our job as an opposition, Barry, is to point out the issues, to raise public awareness, to consult with the individuals concerned,
and oppose it if you don't like it.
Party room, and then, if necessary, to vote against it. That's the way a good opposition works. We actually have a structure, Barry, and it's a good structure and it works appropriately.
OK, on the baby bonus then, reduced from $5,000 to $3,000. You've likened that to the Chinese birth control system.
No, I didn't do that.
Well, yes, you did.
It's a misrepresentation, Barry. I said social policy.
You misrepresented yourself, if that's the case. You said it worked quite well in China, didn't it?
Yeah, what worked quite well? They don't have a baby bonus in China, do they, Barry? So you're misrepresenting me there. What I actually said was social engineering between children out of the same family. Now, you can liken that. Various countries have tried it. The bottom line is, in Australia, we have never had financial penalties associated with the birth of a second or a third child. That has never existed. We've never had that. And
what's a financial penalty? They're getting a bonus of $3,000, and you say that's penalising them. How is it a penalty to give somebody $3,000?
It's a reduced payment
for a second or third child. That's not a penalty.
Oh, OK. So, no, OK. Well, on your assessment, then they're not worse off. So
no, I'm not saying they're not worse off.
As a first child.
They're better off than they would be if they didn't get the $3,000 bonus. You call it a penalty.
Well, of course they are. Of course they are. But actually, for the money that they were going to receive for a second or third child, Jenny Macklin just put out an alert to the professional organisation for the birth of children saying, please don't facilitate people having the early birth of a child to get increased payments. So I'm sorry, that explains it all. I mean, if there's no penalty involved or there's no, and this is the second time they've been through it, Barry. But look, whatever the case, the bottom line here is the government never said it was going to reduce the baby bonus like this previously. It's making it up as it goes along.
So again,
it's doing it on all the policies.
So you will oppose this one then, or do you reserve the right to criticise it and support it?
We will speak to our party room about it. But I just say this, Barry, we have been very responsible in opposition about all of these things. I mean, we've been very upfront with the Australian people. Suggestions of hypocrisy are outrageous, given that we said we could not support and would oppose the $900 payment to families. And in May this year, on the school kids bonus, we said we would oppose it and repeal it. And the government got up every time and said, oh, this party, the Liberal Party, is opposed to families. Well, we've been absolutely true to our word on the need to rein in entitlements. We've done it with our actions as well as our words, but the suggestion somehow that when the government has an ad hoc approach to taking money out of the pockets of families, we should just have a gut reaction to support it without question. We're not in that business.
So you will get rid of the school kids bonus. That's what, $400 for primary school kids and about $800 for secondary school kids?
It's funded out of the mining tax, and there is no mining tax, Barry.
So what happens? Do you return to the old tax refund system?
No, we've said what we've said. We will oppose it, and you'll see our policies before the next election.
But they won't be able to go back to the original arrangement either, where they claim money through the taxation.
We haven't said that. We haven't said that. We haven't said that. We have said we cannot afford the school kids bonus. We've been emphatic about that.
Yes,
and I would hope everyone listens when we say that we cannot support an initiative and we will repeal it
yeah, sure,
if we
but
get into government.
I just want to be clear on this, though, because the school fund, the kids bonus replaced a previous system where you could make claims, keep receipts and make claims back through the taxation system. What I'm asking is whether that goes as well.
Well, that has gone already. It's gone already, and we will go to the next election. Yeah, yes, yeah. And of course, there are other things that have been funded by the mining tax that we've opposed. You see, Barry, we actually believe in principles. We believe in consistency. So, for example, when the GST package was introduced by the Howard government, because you went back to it, when it was introduced, Labor opposed the GST but supported the tax cuts funded by the GST. In our case, we said we cannot support tax cuts funded by the mining tax or payments supported by the mining tax because we do not support the mining tax. So we are entirely consistent in our principles.
So when you said in Europe that there was a need to have an assault on this age of entitlements, then to an extent you think it applies to Australia? There is a need to have a look at entitlements in Australia?
Well, I've always said we need to be wary of it. Always need to be wary of it. And what does that mean? Well, it means that we cannot afford a school kids bonus that is paid by a non-existent mining tax. So I gave a speech before the budget in May. I really wish people would listen to me sometimes. So when I gave the speech back in April, and in May they promised a school kids bonus, and they promised changes to family tax benefit Part A and a range of other things. We said we cannot afford this because the mining tax will not raise money, and we're right.
Well, we do listen to you, and you said during the week the economy is flatlining. Now, it's growing. It's not flatlining.
Well, flatlining, the government said it was meant to be trend growth. It is now below trend growth. Let's be fair dinkum. The government forecasts 3% growth this year. If you look at the major banks' forecasts, I don't think any of them come anywhere near 3%. In fact, the lowest one is 2.3%. So, flatlining is not, if it was zero, it'd be a recession, effectively.
No, if it was zero, it'd be flatlining. That's what flatlining means.
You know what? What's trend growth mean, Barry?
Yeah, that's a very different thing. I would have thought flatlining.
No. Trend growth actually means 3 to 3.5%. Flatlining means that we should be doing trend growth, but we're not. So you can get down to these. You can interpret it whatever you want. The bottom line is the government's forecasting 3% growth. And the consensus forecasts are below 3%.
Yeah, it might have gone unnoticed, except Tony Abbott in the same week promised to get the economy growing again. It's been growing for 21 years.
Well, it should be growing better than trend. Look, the government, can I tell you, Barry, this government's bet everything on above trend or above trend growth. They're not delivering. They're not delivering. That's why the Reserve Bank is reducing interest rates, not because the economy's doing well, but because the economy is under pressure. And this government's making it worse by having no economic strategy, no taxation strategy, no plan to help to grow Australia. Nothing there.
And if all that is true, why do you think Julia Gillard is more popular than Tony Abbott?
I think Julia Gillard is exceptional with a spin. And we're about to see it today with the Asian White Paper. Unless there is substantial money associated with that paper, it's a waste of time. I mean, these guys get a gold medal at the Reports and Inquiries Olympics. That's what they deserve. But they never actually deliver. And if it's just more words from Julia Gillard today, without the massive commitments necessary to make it real, then we're wasting our time.
Do those polls, as opposed to what they say about the relative strengths of the two parties, the polls and what they tell you about Julia Gillard as opposed to Tony Abbott, do they bother you? And is Tony Abbott's leadership safe no matter what the polls say now or into the future?
Yes.
Yes to what?
Well, there was two questions.
Yeah,
there.
the first one was, do they bother you? And the answer is yes.
No, I answered the second question.
Right.
Look, polls go up and down from my perspective. You talked a little bit earlier about the Canberra election. I think the polls said we were going to do quite poorly in Canberra, and we did very well. And I think that's pretty consistent across the country at the moment. From my perspective, what is of greater interest is what you hear on the streets. I went into the main street of the Labor seat of Chisholm in Victoria, 5.7% Labor seat last week, and was literally mobbed in the main street. And people are saying you've got to get rid of this government, and I hear you. We're doing our best.
Thank you for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Anytime, Barry. Thanks.